There has been a big shift, I think, in the Chinese authorities' approach to silver. I mean, in the past, they've basically accumulated silver. They have controlled the price. I mean, the suppression of the silver price, I put down to the Chinese. I mean, I think in 2023, they supplied, I can't remember the figures, but I mean, something like 200 million ounces or something, figure like that, to the West. And the interesting thing was that they supplied it to London, they supplied it to Hong Kong, they supplied it to Singapore, and I think there was somewhere else. I mean, these are all financial centres. These are not manufacturers. In 2024, the financial centres came out of it, and it was supplied more to countries like India, who manufacture solar panels and all the rest of it. I think it's probably stopped now. And if you look at the Shanghai Futures Exchange, the vaulted silver there has dropped very substantially. I'm told that the view is that if it goes down close to 500 million ounces, then we've got real trouble. Well, it's going that way. So, and interestingly, I mean, we wake up in the morning here in Europe and find that gold and silver are going better during Hong Kong's trading hours or Shanghai's trading hours. And we're trying to put a lid on it. That, as you can see today, I mean, we were up to what on gold we were up to what 4,020, and this afternoon, guess what? It's drifted back to something like 3,980. So the sellers, and they're not serious sellers at all. I think they're managers, if you like, rather than sellers, managed to get it done by something like $40 off the top. We'll see what happens overnight again. I mean, there may be a bit of profit taking because obviously ahead of the weekend, the Chinese are wild punters too. I mean, when it comes to futures and things like that, they may well take some profits ahead of the weekend. So we might see some more weakness tomorrow. I don't know. But the underlying situation is that the stuff is running out of the vaults. And sooner or later, there's going to be a huge great conflict between the physical market and the paper market. The problem really with assessing what China owns is that they're very secretive about what they have bought. If you like, and I don't know the answer. I really don't know the answer. So what I've done is I've tried to work out on the information that we have what the answer is likely to be. My starting point in this was that the regulations appointing the People's Bank of China with the sole responsibility for acquiring the nation's gold and silver date from 1983. Now, it was at that time, Mao died in 79 or thereabouts. There was a massive inward investment going into China. And certainly from the early 90s onwards, the trade surplus was beginning to rocket as a result of all the factories that were being built in China by American corporations, mainly, and to a lesser extent, European ones. So, I mean, at the same time, we had a bear market in gold. I mean, huge, great bear market in gold. And so this was an ideal time for the Chinese to pick up gold in particular. Silver was a slightly different thing that was done in a different way. Looking at those foreign exchange flows, which again were the monopoly of the People's Bank of China. So, I mean, they were handling both paper and physical, paper currencies and also physical gold, physical money. I reckon that just putting 10% of those flows across their desk, foreign exchange flows across their desk into gold, by 2002, they'd accumulated somewhere between 20 and 25,000 tons. Now, of course, at the time, the official reserves were something like 300 tons, and they raised it to 600 or something. 2002 is important because that was the date when the Shanghai Gold Exchange opened and members of the public in China were allowed to buy gold. Since then, if you look at the withdrawals from the Shanghai Gold Exchange, they total nearly 28,000 tons. Now, that is gross, if you like, because some of that would have gone back into the vaulting system. Because, if you're going to scrap gold goes in, even if it's bars, physical bars which have been taken out, everything that goes back in is scrapped and re-refined into 4/9 kilo bars. So and of course the other thing is that there was a massive investment by the state in gold mining, and they rapidly became the largest gold miner in the world. And they have produced something like another 10,000 tons on top of that. As well as that, we know, and the whole thing became a bit of a sort of mantra, that gold was flowing from west to east, and it's been doing that for 30 years, so far as we know. And we can add to that China is like Hotel California for gold. You can go in, but it doesn't come out. It's as simple as that. So, putting all this together, and the other thing which we ought to mention is that the major banks in China offer gold accumulation accounts to their depositors. And if you look at the sort of current situation, household savings are 35% of GDP. That is the equivalent of something like $4 or $5 trillion accumulating every year. You have the crisis, which stopped that. Bank rates have been reduced so that the deposit rates, the deposit accounts have been paying less. So we don't know how much has been going into the gold accumulation accounts, but that gold is still held within the Shanghai Gold Exchange's vaulting system. It doesn't get delivered out of it. I think it's probably another 10, 15,000 tons or something from that. Adding the whole thing together, I came to the conclusion that we were looking between the state and also the population, we're looking at a figure like 70,000 tons. Now, 70,000 tons, you've got to bear in mind that the total above ground stocks are around about 200,000 tons. They're not 220,000 tons. Incidentally, it's 200, not 220, which everybody talks about. So 35% of above ground stocks are in China. This is massive.
There's been a very interesting shift in China's approach to silver, one that I believe will go down as one of the great inflection points in the modern monetary story. For decades, China quietly accumulated silver while keeping a lid on its price. In my view, the suppression of the silver price has largely been orchestrated by the Chinese authorities themselves. They were the ones providing the supply, the hidden source that allowed Western markets to maintain the illusion of liquidity. If you go back to 2023, estimates suggest China supplied roughly 200 million ounces of silver to the West. That's a staggering number, but look closely at where that silver went. It wasn't shipped to manufacturers or industrial users. It went to financial centers London, Hong Kong, Singapore. These are paper markets, not physical consumers. The West was being fed just enough physical silver to keep the paper price in line, to maintain the illusion that supply was sufficient. But something very significant changed in 2024. Those financial centers, the Western hubs, dropped out of the export pattern. Instead, Chinese silver began flowing to countries like India, where it was used for actual manufacturing. Solar panels, electronics, and the other pillars of the new industrial age. That shift alone tells you where the priorities now lie. China has stopped subsidizing Western financial liquidity and has begun prioritizing physical economic utility. And now the flow seems to be drying up entirely. If you look at the Shanghai Futures Exchange, vaulted silver inventories have fallen dramatically. Analysts close to the situation say that once those inventories approach 500 million ounces, the system begins to strain. Well, we're heading right toward that line. The vaults are being drained. The easy metal is disappearing. That's why every morning here in Europe, you wake up and see gold and silver prices rising during Asian trading hours, particularly during Shanghai's session. The Eastern markets are bidding up metals, while Western traders, often working for bullion banks, try to suppress them once New York opens. You can almost set your watch by it. In the morning, gold might be up $40 or $50, and by afternoon, you watch it get managed back down. Not sold, not dumped, but managed. There's a difference. These aren't genuine sellers unloading inventory. They're price managers trying to contain perception. It's almost comical at times. You see gold touch $4,020 in Hong Kong, only to be guided back to $3,980 by the time New York's done with it. The pattern repeats like clockwork. But this management doesn't change the underlying reality. The metal is leaving the vaults, the supply chain is tightening, and at some point, the physical market will overpower the paper market. That's when things will get interesting. China, of course, keeps its cards close to its chest. Trying to determine exactly how much gold or silver they own is like trying to guess how many submarines they have in the South China Sea. It's a state secret. But over the years, I've tried to reverse engineer the data using what's available. Trade flows, regulatory filings, mining production, and, most importantly, the historical behavior of the People's Bank of China. The PBOC was officially given the sole responsibility for acquiring the nation's gold and silver back in 1983. That's an important date because it marks the beginning of a long, calculated accumulation